sectors are going to get down to zero emissions by 2050.
Simon Lewis is a professor of global change science.
We need to take some carbon out of the atmosphere, and one of the cheapest and easiest ways is to plant trees. Around half the dry weight of a tree is carbon. As trees grow, they take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in their trunks, leaves and roots, which helps slow the rate of climate change.
And there's never been more global ambition to plant trees. In 2014, 51 countries pledged to plant over 3.5 million square kilometres of forest by 2030, an area slightly larger than India.
Ethiopia has made its mark in the record books by planting over 350 million trees in a single day.
The 2030 target looks likely to be met, but there's a catch.
When you dig down into the numbers of these forests, almost half the area pledged so far by countries is actually for monoculture plantations. And that means a single species planted over thousands and thousands of hectares.
Monoculture tree plantations, like eucalyptus, grow quickly, but the trees are harvested every 10 or so years, releasing much of the carbon stored in the tree back into the atmosphere, which means that, according to some studies, they'll store only around 1/40th of the carbon natural forests do over the long term.
So it's made into short-term products like paper, and then when that paper is used and then discarded, it decomposes, and that carbon goes back into the atmosphere.
Simon analysed pledges from 43 countries in the tropics and subtropics.
These big announcements are not going to deliver on the carbon capture that we're expecting. If they were all natural forests, we would sequester 42 billion tonnes of carbon this century.
In fact, those pledges to plant millions of trees actually promise to store 26 billion tonnes less carbon than they could. Sometimes the motives for planting forests are less green than they might appear. By 2020, Ireland ought to have cut greenhouse gas emissions by 20% below 2005 levels. But at current rates, it will have reduced them by only 5%. Planting forests might help Ireland avoid massive penalties for missing EU targets, because the potential carbon these forests could store in the future can be counted as a carbon credit today. In the 1920s, Ireland had the lowest forest cover in Europe at around 1%. That's now risen to 11%, and the government has set a target to cover 18% of the land with forest by 2046.
In Ireland, they're rapidly increasing the amount of forest cover, but it's overwhelmingly going towards monoculture plantations of conifers.
And now local community groups are protesting against these monoculture tree plantations. They say they're doing more harm than good.
Because these monoculture plantations are about getting the maximum yield as fast as possible, they often apply fertilisers which contribute to greenhouse gas nitrous oxide. Conifer plantations are very densely stocked, so cut out almost all the light, are very poor for biodiversity and can really affect people living nearby.
Save Leitrim campaign is about the forestry policy in Ireland, which is currently having devastating effects on our county in Leitrim. So it's having several different impacts. It's having impacts on the environment, on our communities especially, socially, economically. It's having effects on biodiversity, our water system, ecosystem. It's absolutely decimating our county. And it's very hard when you're standing here, or for the TDs or politicians here in Dublin, to understand what it's like in Leitrim if you haven't come down and seen it. But no matter where you stand in County Leitrim, on a horizon or right up against you, there will be a cypress spruce plantation. So we want the right trees in the right places, managed in the right way. We need a complete overhaul of the forestry policy, and it needs to be stopped now. It's something that we need to discuss with the Minister. Like, how are we ever going to get anywhere if it's just our ideas, his ideas, and this big barrier between us like today? So I would love to see, for me personally, I would love to see the right trees, the right places, managed in the right way, but also a celebration and an enhancement of high nature value farming. That has to happen, because our land in Leitrim is always described as the worst land and it's fit for nothing else but planting, but that's not true.